Blackhawks fans. Welcome into the Four Feathers podcast. It's season 6, episode 9, but it's not so nice based on recent Blackhawks happenings. It's Johnny Nani here alongside my guy, Tony Marchese. Tony, it's Thanksgiving week, but I'm not feeling too cheery right now.
No, not cheery at all, Johnny. In fact, probably just the opposite. I'm not even sure if we can be thankful for the kind of hockey that we've been watching lately. I don't know about you, but it's been up and down. I'm a little worried about some things. I don't know about you, but that's been a hot topic in the Blackhawks community lately about a few things that we're going to discuss today. But I'm glad to be back on the mic with you. I know I missed last week, and I think I've got to get back up in the lead on these predictions at the end of the episode here. I know that things are getting a little close.
Yeah, right. We'll do all of our usual segments. We'll have those predictions, update the tracker at the very end. But as usual, we're going to talk through some recent trends, some takeaways from the Blackhawks play since the last time we talked. They went 1-3-1 in that stretch, and there's some contention there, especially regarding Luke Richardson, Taylor Hall, Philip Kurashev, Connor Bedard's goalless streak. We'll get into all of that, ruffle some feathers, do some stick taps per usual. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube at OnTap Sportsnet. There, give us a follow on the socials at Four Feathers Pod and at OnTap Sportsnet. And as always, check out OnTapSportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. Okay, Tony, as I mentioned, since the last time we talked, I kind of got caught up last week, so we previewed 3, but there were 2 extra ones in there. Blackhawks go 1-3-1 in this stretch, and the odd thing is they defeat the reigning Stanley Cup champions for their 1 win. It's just kind of the oddball sort of season this has been so far.
Very odd, and you know what? I'm not complaining about the win against Florida. I was in attendance for that one. And I'm 3-1 on the year. I think the game that you and I took in is the only one that they've lost so far. So we're going to have to get you back out there and get a win under your belt, Johnny. But there was like no way anyone would have predicted that outcome over the Florida Panthers. The way that this team has played, that's such an outlier. I feel like right now when I'm looking at just the last set of games that we're discussing here, everything seemed to click there. I don't understand why that hasn't translated out. Like, you can see it's there against a great opponent. Florida's really good hockey team. You should be able to beat Anaheim, right? Like, you should be able to go in.
They did earlier this season.
Yeah. I mean, I would be okay if maybe they grabbed 2 out of these, but the fact that they only grabbed 1 and it was probably against the best of those opponents.
Yep.
It's interesting. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Yeah. It's frustrating, Tony. I guess the reason for it is that they elevated their level of attention to detail against those top-tier opponents. If you remember, there was that 2-1 overtime win against Minnesota that we discussed on our last episode there. But you go and look at that game against Florida, 1-for-1 on the power play, 2-for-2 on the penalty kill. You got great play from Mrazek. That early power play goal in the game really helped them kind of set the tone, so to say, for the rest of it. And then some stingy defense because Florida still got their shots on, but they're mostly kept to the outside. So, it's unfortunate that it has to take those types of teams coming in for them to elevate their level of attention to detail, because then you go and see games like the Anaheim game where they had 2 leads at various points early on in the game, let it slip late, and then Philly, same thing, a 2-0 lead that they ended up letting slip and losing in overtime. So, Tony, the overarching thing, we could go dive in on details of all these games. But let's take it big picture here, and it's a lack of offense. It's something that we've been talking about for most of the season so far. It leaves them as the worst team in the NHL with a 7-12-2 record, only 16 points. That's a .381 points percentage. The constant line shuffling certainly isn't helping matters. I understand Luke Richardson wanting to press right buttons, but you do have to let guys play together at some point to develop some chemistry, and then you had some interesting decisions in there. It's all highlighted by Connor Bedard's scoring slump, Tony. You've been asking, when's he going to break out? And I told you at the end of October that, it's coming because the underlying numbers were good. It hasn't happened. Now he was playing on a defensive role sort of game that leads us to a 12-game goal drought. He's got 6 assists in that span, but 3 of them came in 1 game. two of them came in another, both against the Ducks. So, Tony, this is definitely reason for concern here. I don't know if it's the end of the world, but it's reason for concern.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. It's definitely not the end of the world right now, but it's definitely something you don't want to see. We don't even want to be talking about this. Obviously, this year, team was supposed to be a little bit more competitive than I think where we're at right now. They definitely wanted to see another step from Connor Bedard. I think one of my goals on our season preview show was Bedard get through this season healthy. So far, so good with that, but I didn't expect the scoring slump. He's been moved from center to wing. He's had, a shuffle of line mates. It's almost like he's played with, pretty much everybody at this point in some way, shape, or form, whether that be on the power play in 5-on-5 time. And there's a handful of guys he hasn't had much ice time with, but he's not found that level of comfort that he had last year with Philip Kurashev, and that chemistry that you talk about. It's probably going to take a little bit more juggling. The Bedard and who was that he's skating with? Dickinson, I believe it was.
Anderson, it was.
And Anderson for the last two games. That line somewhat seemed to work initially, even though I didn't really like the design of it. I see that there was new lines of practice today, but
it can work, but that's more of your shutdown line because they didn't even, what was it, against Florida, didn't even have a shot on goal in their 5-on-5 time, but they essentially
that's the defensive role that you talk about.
But they essentially limited Barkov's unit to the outside. So it works in a way, but it's not offensively. I'll tell you that.
But I was just concerned a little bit by the fact that it was right after this that you get the comments from Connor Bedard about how frustrated he is when he's talking about, I could do 100 things better than this. He expresses the frustration out there after a team victory, right? So that's what sort of stood out to me the most was the fact that they got the job done. And when you hear Connor Bedard talk last season about, some of the accolades that he was starting to rack up, he talked about, I wanted to win the games. I was surprised that it sort of came out that he's frustrated with his game after the win. It would have seemed more appropriate or a stock answer for an athlete who's going through maybe a little bit of their own frustration to talk about, well, tonight isn't about me, it's about the team. And this was the first time you sort of heard Connor Bedard talk about himself, with those comments about how he's frustrated with the lack of scoring, the lack of offensive play. This is the longest streak, I believe, that he's had in his hockey career. Obviously, it's very short tenured in the NHL, but in juniors and everything, I don't think he's ever gone this long without scoring. I think at the end of the day, this will be good once he snaps out of it, assuming he does. I have every reason in the world to believe that he will, because the NHL is a different level than what kids his age are playing in right now. There's not many 19-year-old kids who are out there. This is his first foray into adulthood and struggles, and he's going to have to find ways to do that. I know we were going back and forth with the Four Feathers chat about, leaders on the team stepping up. You don't know what's being said behind closed doors, but last season's version of Nick Foligno, and I'm not trying to call this out here, I just haven't seen that layer that he was sort of exhibiting
publicly, right?
Yes, at least publicly. Have not seen that layer of what made him de facto captain last year, right now as the captain. So I'm a little concerned with just the dynamic of what's going on with all of this. And I know that can lead into, some of the speculation about, has Luke Richardson lost the locker room? And there's all of this panic right now. But I think it's important to look at this and say, my most concerning aspect that I'm pinpointed on right now is Connor Bedard talking about himself after a victory, talking about how frustrated he is, because it is a story. And you're starting to see, opposing fans from other teams and other guys who were drafted in this draft class sort of sent up. You obviously have the Michkov goal the other night. That sort of stings for Blackhawks fans. If you're going online after this game, you're seeing all of this input from Philly fans on how great Michkov is, and Connor Bedard stinks and all this other stuff. There's a lot of noise, and I'm sure for Connor, right, that's overwhelming. So that's where you need that Nick Foligno type, those guys to sort of shelter and get him back into his game. Johnny, I'm really curious what your thoughts are on Bedard right now as well.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice if the guys that you signed to give him some more talent were actually, A, playing with him, and B, were worthy of playing alongside him. But that hasn't been the case for Tyler Bertuzzi and Teuvo Teravainen so far. I know there's some looks, like you'd said, on power play units where the combination is out there. But at 5-on-5, I believe, per Ben Pope, it's only like 48 seconds together at 5-on-5 all year. And he mentioned that, it didn't click very much during the early stages of the preseason, but it's not a reason to abandon it forever. I'm kind of in line with that. I would like to see it happen again at some point. You would imagine it will, with how frequently Luke Richardson has been shuffling these lines, which we're going to get to another layer of this in a minute. But there's a confidence shaken issue there, Tony, and I agree with the timing of it, because I believe that was Friday and it was after Thursday's win was when this kind of like comments like came out. But he's got the weight of the city, so to say, on his shoulders, and last year it was kind of dashing through that and kind of riding the high of all these accolades and rookie records and tying franchise legends for certain milestones of multi assists and what have you, points.
Every day was different.
All this, right. NHL PR had a field day with it on Twitter, right? But they call it, sophomore slump happens. It's a very real thing. It's a very real phenomena through all of sports, and obviously there's multiple factors that are playing into this. Line mates could be a huge one there, but then there's a confidence aspect of it. You don't score like you did your rookie year. You think you should be better after learning, from your first pro season. That starts to just pile on. So the thing is, though, the kid is too talented not to break out of this slump. That's what I just want to highlight here. And there's a reason why why is there so much pressure on him? Why is there so much media attention on him, Tony? Because the expectation for him is to be, one of the greatest players of this generation. I still think that ability is there. I mean, the shot release itself is nasty. He's just got to get back to doing it, right? He's got to generate some rush chances. I know this team isn't very good for that, but maybe this time will at least give him some familiarity, because in today's version of the line blender, Tony, at practice on Monday, Taylor Hall on his left wing and Philip Kershev playing on the right there. So that'll be interesting to see how that holds up too, because we still got a couple, another day of practice before that game and a morning skate on Wednesday before they actually get back into game action. And of course, it'll be against a team that's very tough to play against in the Dallas Stars. But we'll see if that one, maybe that, kind of chemistry from Kershev there will help get him out of the slump. I will say that line's a defensive liability. I know they're not out there for that, but, Luke Richardson also has a job to do. His job is to try to win hockey games, right? So I understand in the long term of the Blackhawks, a win here on Black Wednesday of Thanksgiving 2024 isn't, the end all be all. But at the same time, when you've got the Matt Duchenes of the world breathing down your neck and Rupe Hintz and all of them on Dallas, if Taylor Hall's turning the puck over at the blue line, like he had a propensity to do, and what got him healthy scratched, it could be a long night there. And you're talking about a minus with Bedard. But who knows? We'll see how that all plays out on Wednesday.
I just want to jump in here, too, because we're talking about this, and I saw this the other day. It was from Prasanth Iyer on X. He does some hockey charts, and this one was interesting to me, Johnny, and I you're not going to be shocked to hear this, but this came out. This was data as of the 22nd, so 3 days ago. Nearly every team in the NHL is dumping the puck in more than last season, and the Hawks are part of that. I believe there's just about a 2% dump in increase for the Blackhawks. But the problem that I'm seeing right here, if you look at this chart, I'll share this over with you in a bit. In 2023, 2024, the Hawks were recovering right around 21% of those dump-ins. Where do you think that percentage is right now, Johnny?
Oh, they got to be close to like 10.
It's right around 10%. And the next closest team to them is San Jose, and they are at about 21%.
Right. Yeah,
so you're for the Bedard, for the whole entire offense. We're talking about the entire offense here with this slump. If you're not recovering at least 20% of your dump-ins, the puck is going back the other way nonstop.
Yeah. And then you're already tired, even if you do recover it in the defensive zone and have to come back.
How many times have you seen Connor Bedard spend almost an entire offensive shift in the defensive zone?
Yeah. Too often for this whole team, man. It's not just him. It's the whole team. But yeah.
Out there, dump the puck in.
Bedard here, yeah.
Right back. And the whole rest of the time is them trying to clear the puck.
You know, a lot of fans like to MF Richardson, and I get it. The coach is going to wear it, right, when the team performance isn't up to snuff. But you got to basically their forwards have to be better than that. And I understand that the system is definitely more conservative in terms of their 1-2-2 style there. You got to just have a TW to win the puck, right? That 10%. Of retrieving dump-ins is going to have to increase if they have any chance at trying to sustain some level of offense here. It's not just a Connor Bedard thing. It is across the whole forward group there. So, I hope that's a point of emphasis in the team meetings.
I would hope so as well. I mean, you look at the chart like that and you can actually see, on paper what it is that you're seeing every night watching this team play hockey. They just cannot create good zone entries. They can't create any offense. Then everybody wants to pile on. Why can't Connor Bedard score? Well, half the time he's playing defense.
Yeah.
Or over half the time for that matter. So it's frustrating. I thought I'd bring that one up for you. I don't like that data.
Yeah.
I don't like that data.
No, it's tough to stomach. Like I said, I hope that's a point of emphasis moving forward. All right, let's talk about another hot topic here. Luke Richardson, the line blender. We had that episode. Our last one was called Line Blender Go Brr. Well, it's just gone brr off the charts now. It's spilling. It's overflowing. It's all over the kitchen. It's ridiculous. You've seen those combinations we'd mentioned, Bedard playing with Anderson and Dickinson, which, you can understand with Dickinson, but I think most people were frustrated about Anderson on the wing. But that's also kind of a buddy system there because Dickinson and Anderson play really well and complement each other well. So it's tough. It's tough trying to press these buttons to get it right. They're moving off of that, though. As I mentioned, Hall, Bedard, Kurashev was the first line. Bertuzzi, Donato, Teravainen, Mikheyev, Foligno, Anderson, and then Maroon, Reichel, Smith was what was thrown out there during Monday's practice. Tony, these combinations, you on paper looks better, right? But the results are going to be what matters in this, because if they go and have another stinker and lose 3-1, 4-2 to Dallas, like they've already done both of those scores this year against Dallas, granted in Dallas's building, it's going to say, well, Richardson, it's his fault for then changing up the lines again. Even though most people asked for it there. So it's a conundrum here, Tony. What are your takes on the line blender continuing to spin out of control?
I mean, at this point, I know a lot of people want things to just sort of settle down in terms of, giving Bedard that bit of consistency. I like the Hall, Bedard, Kurashev line. It brings him back to Philip Kurashev, a guy that he was comfortable with last season. Again, as I said a little bit earlier here, hasn't translated yet this season into success for Bedard or Kurashev, but at least this is a familiar line, and I can get the reason why you want to throw Hall up there on the first line as well. I think they need to make a decision rather soon here. We saw this last year with Lucas Reichel when he was going through the slump, moving him off of center, and then eventually he winds up down in Rockford. I don't think Bedard's going to Rockford by any stretch of the imagination. However, do you want Bedard playing center for the remainder of the season, or is it going to become an issue even further with Luke Richardson that people are going to dig in on. Are we flipping him back between center and wing over and over again? This team's in a lot of trouble if Connor Bedard isn't playing center. That's just my thought and my takeaway. I know him on the wing gives him a little bit more freedom, but man,
right.
I'm looking at this and it feels better than last year, but it's so much worse. I don't know, man. I like the lines. I would keep these lines for at least 3 or 4 games, reevaluate, but it's been so difficult to get anything going, as we've sat here and said over and over again, that like, I almost don't blame Luke Richardson for changing things up the way that it's going, because you're just, that's your roster that you have. And like, there's only so many parts that,
you can maybe not agree with the decision, especially like I said, pointing out the example of Anderson there, but it's the need to press buttons, right? Try to do that. And he's done that with some healthy scratches too, which we'll talk about there. Just one thought on that top line when I go and look at it, and it's a name that we're going to talk about here, Taylor Hall. I'd mentioned him a little bit previously, but this line, while, you talk about Bedard and Kershev, that's the headline of it, right? Because, can they rekindle the chemistry that was there last year? Totally understand that. This line, their success is going to be contingent on Taylor Hall's effort and awareness level. I guarantee it. If he's turning pucks over sloppily at the blue line at either zone, it's going to end up in the back of the Blackhawks net, because none of those players are defensively, stout enough to get back and break up those chances like a Jason Dickinson is. So, I'm not saying that Taylor Hall deserved to be scratched, and I think the manner in which it went down, even Luke Richardson can admit that didn't go exactly the way that he wanted, and he said he should have approached it differently. But when I then now listen to the reason actually why it was for turnovers at the blue line, in case you missed it, I watched some of his shifts after that, and I was like, man, that guy is really pretty fucking careless around the boards when he's trying to either keep a play or get it out of the zone in the defensive zone. So, like I said, it's a veteran guy. You probably want him in there for that offensive prowess. So probably wasn't the best guy to scratch there. But if Luke Richardson is going to send a message that you cannot be doing that kind of stuff, he had video example of it, and I saw it. So it's on Taylor Hall. A lot of this is going to hinge on Taylor Hall.
And it's interesting. And one thing that we haven't brought up yet, out of these lines, the one that's been the most impactful and is still together is Maroon Reichel Smith on your fourth line.
They draw weaker matchups and they are able to find seams. That has been their success calling card. Reichel's speed, Maroon's vision. I know he's slow, he's old. The analytics people say he's bad, but he has that perfect pass in the last 2 games they played, right? Setting up Craig Smith's goal against Florida, setting up Lucas Reichel's goal for that nice snipe from the Rockstar zone on Saturday against Philly. It's just something that's worked. So if there is one, positive among those, it sucks that it has to be your fourth line. And I know it becomes a joke, a meme, and a blowback on Richardson once again. But kudos to him for not breaking up one thing that is actually working.
Yeah. I mean, stick with that one until it doesn't. The only thing that I was thinking about though, Johnny, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, say Hall doesn't work out on that first line, would you potentially throw a Smith up there with Bedard, Kershev, or where else are you going with this? You gotta
let this one ride. You got to let this one ride just to start and see if Taylor Hall is up to snuff with those guys, because there's going to be mistakes by Kershev too, and Bedard's obviously 19 years old. I understand it. It's not all squarely on the shoulders of Taylor Hall, but I'm just saying, as a veteran guy there, a guy who has had some noticeable, like I said, turnovers in those crucial areas, he's got to limit those, especially since there is no defensive guy to lean back on that line like you would if you had a Jason Dickinson or a Joey Anderson on that line. So if they can drive play, Hall can use his speed, and Bedard and Kershev can use their creativity, you might see the scoring slump end. You might see some life there, even if they do give up a few chances the other way. That would, I think, be ideal. I think people would be more satisfied with that. But after that, Sure, you're throwing it back into the blender, seeing if Ryan Donato, Craig Smith, I guess you could add in as an option there. But just in terms of who's earned it, in terms of who's going to go and dig out a puck for you, Ryan Donato would probably be my pick if you do have to pivot off of Hall. But I would like to see these ones stay, at least for a sample size here.
Yeah, I was just curious who you'd slot up in there. I was thinking potentially Smith, maybe Donato as well is another name there. But Donato, I almost want to keep away from Bedard so that there's some offense on any other line. That's just the only guy that seems to have been able to put together some good, decent stretches, and it can also center some stuff and make impact plays so far this season for the Blackhawks.
Gritty plays.
Yeah.
Talk about, yeah, I guarantee Ryan Donato has probably got to be one of their better guys, at least at retrieving a puck. You're talking about those dump in stats. I just look at his goal against Seattle that when they lost 3-1 to start that quick 2-game road trip, they had nothing going offensively, and he quite literally willed that puck into the net by following a shot and going and digging it out around 3 defenders and then past the goaltender who was sprawled out there. So it'll be interesting to see how these ones shake out here. Tony, on these, I'd mentioned my kind of thing about Taylor Hall, Philip Kurashev being the healthy scratch against Florida, Philadelphia. This is where I would, probably differ from Luke Richardson. I know Kurashev's game hasn't been up to the standard of what they want. This is... It's tough to see, though, because when you go and look at Kurashev's numbers from last year, and people were, I think we're just clamoring for him to be back with Bedard here. Luckily, this is the case now. I don't know if that gave you the best chance to win, even though they did win against Florida. You're able to do it. But if you didn't get that early power play goal, you didn't get that lucky break from Smith off of Maroon's pass against Florida, I don't know if you really win that game. And Philip Kurashev probably gives you the better chance there. So this is one where I would, differ with Luke Richardson on there. It's interesting situation. You hope we talk a lot about Connor Bedard's confidence and all of this. Well, I hope Philip Kurashev's confidence isn't shot because of this.
He's definitely not had the season that he had last year, and that's not even up for discussion at this point, Johnny. I don't know if we're going to get any insight into whether or not Kurashev or even, Bertuzzi's another name that you can throw out there. What's his?
I had to lead
like at this point.
I led off with him and Teravainen. I mean, that'd be ideal. Talking about who they signed. Ideally in the summer, if this was July 25th and we're talking about lines, it's Teravainen, Bedard, and Bertuzzi, right? Now November 25th, they're nowhere to be seen.
That's as the episode title, displays here. That's not so nice. It's not so nice right now.
Yeah, so we'll see. Like I said, that's a line blender back in effect for Wednesday's game against the Stars. They will with this though. I do think the timing spacing of the games may be a little bit more beneficial for them when you can have multiple practice days and then even just those line rushes and morning skate. I know it's not a heavy practice on the day of the game, but skating with those guys for an extended stretch before you put it up against the best players in the world, right? Should at least help get them more acclimated, even though it's still a short amount of time. It's not like a full training camp, but you got to take your breaks when you can during the season, especially when it's a grind, essentially playing every other night. So let's get into some roster notes. Alec Martinez returned against Seattle, so he's been back for the stretch. Unfortunately, Seth Jones went out. He's on IR. They said towards the end of last week, roughly 4 weeks. So we're looking at a little over 3 weeks, approximately right now. Other than that, Dickinson took a puck to the right hand in Thursday's game, but he did come back to finish that, missed most of the second period, came back to finish. He's missed 2 practices, but he played against Philadelphia. So just keep an eye on that. We'll keep you posted over at Four Feathers Pod. But Tony, the one that sticks out to me is Laurent Brossoit is still on, injured / non-roster. No timeline for his return. You're going to approach a juncture with Arvid Soderblom here. If he plays in, I believe it's 4 more games. I think this is a Charlie Remiliotis note. If he plays in 4 more games, then they would have to send him through waivers to get him through to Rockford. So you're going to still ride Mrazek, and you can do that with the spacing here. Mrazek started the last two after his, personal issue came back from that. He's going to, I would imagine, start Wednesday against the Stars, and then you got a day off. So then he probably starts Friday, probably starts Sunday, or you flip it and start Soderblom Sunday against Columbus and have Mrazek for Monday against Toronto. Interesting situation that is, unfortunately, I get it. Injuries happen in this game, and that if that knee surgery came up, later in the summer, it's tough.
That's not what we were billed, though.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's now going to create a roster crunch if it extends another, say, 2 weeks here.
Mm-hmm. And man, I originally thought maybe first, second week in November.
Right.
For Brossoit. We're pushing December now. No timeline for return. You got to start to wonder at some point, is this guy going to suit up before the All-Star game? I would imagine there's probably got to be some rehab time too. Not going to go in cold. We've seen guys come back.
He's been on and off the ice though. That's the odd thing there. So I wonder, how the knee's feeling. Only he can answer that. And clearly not good enough to get even close to like full practice, because he's been like, the one time he did be out there for practice, he was kind of like rotating in as the third goalie. So just not. It's a tough outlook, and it is. Especially with Soderblom, I will say good for Arvid Soderblom for stepping up in with Brossoit sideline. But then that creates, like I said, roster complications there. And there's still going to be a couple of weeks here. So in an ideal world, he'd heal up and potentially be ready come mid-December, right? So you're only using Soderblom for 3 more starts here.
It wouldn't be bad. It wouldn't be bad, Johnny, at least in my opinion, if Arvid Soderblom continues to play really well. Brossoit takes a little bit more time, and we get near to the point where teams are starting to make a couple of deals. And maybe somebody, just maybe, is interested in Arvid Soderblom because, they've got an injury. That's my next one. What if somebody wants Peter Mrazek? You're already at this point in the year digging yourself another one of these holes that we've talked about for the last 2 seasons on this podcast. Bottom barrel of the league. You're going to have some moves. I'm sure people are going to be interested in Peter Mrazek. Maybe they're interested in Arvid Soderblom. The only reason I would hope to trade Soderblom more than Peter Mrazek is just because I think that, his projection out into the longer term here is more attractive to a team if he becomes, a little bit better.
So you're talking return on the trade, right?
Return on, I don't know if you're going to get a lot for a rental Peter Mrazek unless some team really, really likes what they've got. What does he have on his deal left? 1 more year after this?
I believe so. Yeah, he signed 2-year extension. So it's a game of quirks and all of this. It could very well depend on other teams' injury situations. Does someone in late January have a goalie injury that is going to be long term, that they need a stopgap right now? Peter Mrazek's your guy over Soderblom in that case.
Yes, he is. But maybe, just maybe, somebody sees Arvid Soderblom on this, actual forward trajectory, taking some steps up. Granted, it has to continue to happen. And they say, maybe we want to take a chance on this guy. Peter Mrazek does offer a great backstop, stopgap goaltender right now for a competing team. Maybe Brossoit comes back in and, allows the Blackhawks to potentially move on from one of those goaltenders, and we get a nice little return out of it. That would be a better situation, I think, than what we would have anticipated going into this year, with Arvid Soderblom starting the year in Rockford and sort of just clogging up, playing time for Drew Commesso. So I'm not really I mean, am I disappointed that Brossoit hasn't played a game in a Blackhawks uniform so we get to see a new goalie and like what do
Yeah.
we have here? Yes, absolutely. But
What what if I told you? So okay, let's do our dates: July 25th versus November 25th. What if I at July 25th? What if I told you that through the first quarter of the season, Craig Smith would be Kyle Davidson's best offseason free agent signing? That's where we're at. That's where we're at right now.
I mean,
Obviously, it's a
that's the
quarter of the
Chicago.
season. There's a quarter of the season, and there are multi-year deals for Bertuzzi, Brossoit, and Teravainen. But so far, Craig Smith.
Craig Smith has really shown up.
Talk about trade deadline.
I mean,
He's going to be someone. I mean, it's not going to be a major return, but he's someone they'll ship out. He's only a 1-year deal.
Man, I did not think we were going to be sitting here doing that whole thing again. I think Donato is probably a name that's going to move now for sure as well too.
And we talked about him a couple episodes ago. Yeah.
Yep. I did not want to be doing this. Did not want to be doing this on November 25th before Thanksgiving, thinking about, who might get traded. But here we are. Here we are again. I mean, it's just time is a flat circle.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. CHSN update. So this launched a day after we released our last episode. Their direct-to-consumer streaming service is out now. It's $19.99 a month for one team, $29.99 a month for all three teams. Obviously, Hawks, Sox, and Bulls on that. Tony, I have DirecTV, so I've had the channel since its inception. I know you've been having some success with the over-the-air stuff. So none of us here at the Four Feathers podcast have used the streaming service, their direct-to-consumer setup. But I did see some initial, gripes from some people who had subscribed that even after they had, subscribed and filled out the payment information, they went to go and access the stream and they were having issues with that there. I haven't seen that recently, so I'm hoping that got ironed out. But if that hasn't, if you are still having issues, let us know over on X at Four Feathers Pod, because we're kind of foreign to that experience there with not having it. So let us know on that. But it's just a continuation of the CHSN tenuous rollout period.
Yeah, I saw some screenshots from unhappy customers, but like you said, I'm not participating.
Seemed like that was.
In the
I feel like I'd hear about it more recently if it was persisting. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure they worked those issues out. And with any great product launch, there's going to be some technical difficulties.
Great,
but,
you're calling it great.
Yeah.
Maybe
sarcastically.
Let's move on. Let's move on and ruffle some feathers here. Okay, mine is I'll go short, sweet, simple. No, Luke Richardson and the Blackhawks aren't ruining Bedard because he's got a goalless drought for 3 weeks in late October to early November here in his second season. He is way too talented for that. I understand, totally understandable to be concerned about it. I think everybody is. Anybody's going to be concerned when Bedard doesn't score for 5 games after he breaks this drought, right? If that happens, it's probably going to happen at some point. For Patrick Kane on 5-game goal droughts, right? He's not being ruined right now. I know that's the overreaction, Tony. I think this is going to play in to your ruffle some feathers here, because I fully agree with it. I understand frustration with Richardson. Totally fine to voice that stuff, but the over-the-top dramatic, they're ruining him. This kid's not going to be an elite NHL player because of what's happening in his beginning of his sophomore year. Just cut that out. He's way too talented for it not to come back around. So patience. I like that. He's not being ruined.
Are you sure he's not being ruined?
He's not being ruined. He's struggling right now. He's not being ruined.
It's overreaction central. But that does lead into my ruffle some feathers here. And it's been tough in the city of Chicago lately. There's been not a lot of things to be very hopeful about when it comes to our sports teams. Obviously, the Blackhawks, as we're talking about right now, are the bottom of the NHL standings. The baseball teams in the city continue to make summers miserable. The Bulls, who share the United Center with our beloved Chicago Blackhawks, seem to be, mired in mediocrity a little bit. I I don't watch much Bulls basketball, but that seems to be the overwhelming theme. And then you've got what everybody in the town talks about all the time. This is Chicago Bears. And man, have they just gone on an absolute tear of just ripping fans' hearts out every single Sunday in every way possibly imaginable. And my ruffle some feathers is Bears fans who are also Hawks fans need to take their Bears fan anger and shove it towards Matt Eberflus and not let that start to roll into what's going on with Luke Richardson. Yes, things are bad. Yes, there's things that can be, commented on right now with Luke Richardson. But I feel like Bears fans want Luke Richardson fired just because they can't get rid of Matt Eberflus right now. And you almost start to see it bleed into Blackhawks hockey in social media because the Bears are not going to fire Eberflus. So there has to be a coach in the city of Chicago. I'm a firm believer. There has to be one coach in this city who is on the hot seat. And after we disposed of Pedro Grifol from the White Sox this past season, the people want someone, and Luke Richardson has sort of drawn the ire with this Blackhawks slow start. But I just don't think right now is the right time to move on from Luke Richardson while you're already so far down the barrel of this, at least this year. Like, what is it going to prove, John? Right. Piggybacking off of what you just said, what is it going to prove? Is Connor Bedard all of a sudden going to score one goal and everybody's going to go, look, it was Luke Richardson's fault? Yeah. It's not realistic.
Because guess what? Jim Montgomery's off the market. I know there were probably some hot takes about that. I didn't see too many of them, but I know. He was hired by the Blues there, Tony. But on that front, then too, who are your places? Are you giving the chair back to Derek King? I don't think so.
That seems like what would probably happen. Like that's not going to solve anything. At least up until this point, I understand the Hall stuff. We sort of went through that, but there is no. I don't think there's any benefit towards just getting rid of Luke Richardson, other than it will make people happy.
Yeah,
for a temporary, fleeting moment, people will be happy, and there won't be Luke Richardson. But then it's like, okay, what do you have now?
Right, and
I don't know if that answer is going to be better right now, at least in the season.
You have to take into account the whole context of things. Remember the first 2 years, Luke Richardson was essentially immune from most criticism because the roster was, what it was in terms of essentially AHL players. And then you finally got Bedard as your lone bright spot. And then you go this year, it's still not built to win, right? That roster, you can't go and say, sure, I think everybody expected it to be better. Don't get me wrong. But the thing was, this would be true evaluation year for Luke Richardson, right? So sure, so far not so good, but we're just a little over a quarter the way through, one game over a quarter of the way through the schedule. And then you got to take into consideration the contractual aspects behind it. I don't know if it was disclosed publicly, but I've heard the rumblings out there that this is, year 3 and it would be a team option for a 4th year. So if there was a logical time to move on, I know Bears fans aren't going to like this because, they pride themselves on the not firing mid-season, all of that. Totally. I get it, but look at it contractually and we're going to let him play out this season, in my opinion, unless something goes insanely bad. And then they can just, if they want to move on, after the year, they can decline that option if that is what those contract terms are. So they got to take into those. While it doesn't feed your, your sense for immediate something, just something to give you a spark. That's essentially what people that are calling for it are asking for. You got to take into factor the logical, elements at play there. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I have no problem with people being upset with the results that have taken place so far this season. I mean, I'm looking at our games they'll want back tracker, and I think there's 6 entries on that right now. What are we, 7 and 12?
Yeah. Part of it on coaching, part of it on players, though, too.
Part of it on coaching, part of it on players. There's plenty of blame to go around in those losses. I would expect out of those 6, maybe take 4 of them. We'd be talking about totally different things. not firing Luke Richardson included in there. Like it wouldn't probably be being broached at this juncture. I think the problem goes back to, and I'm not blaming Ben Pope for this. I think that was perfectly appropriate to write, but there was an article that came out, and you sort of hinted at it. It was, this is going to be the first year where you can evaluate Luke Richardson based on the talent. I sort of take that another step further and say, if Luke Richardson's getting evaluated, maybe we should, look up a step too and take into consideration that Kyle Davidson assembled this roster for Luke Richardson.
Hey, if we want to be this knee jerk at the quarter point of the season here, 3 out of Kyle Davidson's 4 free agent signings have been busts. Fire Kyle Davidson.
That's sort of where we're at.
If you want to apply that, sort of, like I said, knee jerk, I still call it knee jerk when you look in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it's a decent sample size. I'm not going to discount the fact that, we're at Thanksgiving basically, but still in the grand scheme of things, you still got 3 more of these sessions to go, right? Like, and things can drastically change. Now, will they? Maybe not drastically, maybe market improvements, but when we look at what the goals are for this season, getting Connor Bedard back on track would be number 1. Getting through the season healthy with a couple of these guys, number 2. And then number 3 is prospect development. A lot of that stuff's taking place in Rockford right now. We're going to probably see a name or 2 come up here right now within the next, what would you say, 2 months? You think we'll see Frank Nazar?
Yep. Sounds about right.
So there's minor improvements that are coming. I just don't think that Luke Richardson and getting rid of him right now is going to be the answer. Now, are there things that need to be addressed from the coaching standpoint? Probably. The dump in stuff that I was talking about earlier. Maybe we need to reinforce some things with the players who are on the ice,
right? Or loosen up the system just a little bit to give them that extra leeway to go in and get those pucks. I feel like they're very timid, and it's just kind of a skate by and maybe force one direction instead of actually having a willingness to go in and win that puck.
I was just surprised, man, this weekend, right? The past weekend, or actually for the last week, it's like Luke Richardson has sort of become like, people are almost trying to turn him into a meme. Like we did sort of with Pedro Grifol over in the White Sox season. And like, I just don't see the translation there. When Luke Richardson comes out and talks, I've generally gotten a pretty decent, explanation, or at least a follow through, the reasoning of why things were happening the way they were.
Even if you don't agree with it. Yep.
Even if you don't agree with it, there's somewhat like a logical statement and an explanation behind it. And then you get other coaches who've been in this city, like Matt Eberflus, who goes up there and just spews words out of his mouth that don't really mean anything. And then, Pedro Grifol, who, it just, nothing made sense there. And there was sort of that lack of like, it seems like Richardson wants to win. He has carried the same attitude since, the early phases of the rebuild. Is his record one of the worst in Blackhawks history? Sure, but look what he's been dealt with roster wise, and all of that has been above him. So I just want to make sure that we're all playing fair is fair here. That's my ruffles and feathers.
Sorry, I like
that
it.
Was long-winded.
Nope, that was a good segment, and I think that was a good continuation of the Richardson discussion. So let's move on to something a little more positive, some stick taps. So we like to elevate it towards the end of the show here. I'll kick it off. Jason Dickinson for gutting out that stinger on his right hand coming back that really helped the Blackhawks able to shut down that game. And then, so we're not talking about a totally winless stretch here. From our last episode, Tony, he got that one out against the Florida Panthers. I know they got some shots on and ramped up the pressure in the third period, as you'd expect for a team trailing. But Jason Dickinson's presence, it was big that he was able to come back in that one. So stick taps to him.
Absolutely stick taps to him. I'm going to go with a goalie. Shocker. Peter Mrazek has been once again a brick wall for this team. Really, coming back from, I believe it was not disclosed, but a personal issue. Had a day away from the team. Still looked pretty damn solid coming right back after that. And then obviously the win against Florida. He's really continued to play out of his mind ever since his first year here in Chicago. There was one little blip this season that I recall where things weren't as steady for him, but he's really been just a solid backstop, Johnny, for now a season and a quarter. So it's been a good continuation there. So I got to give some stick taps to Peter Mrazek because facing a lot of shots.
Yep.
Dealing without Seth Jones back there right now, keeping the Hawks in some games, and I think that that's worthy of some stick taps.
Yep, I agree. Even you talk about the win. Obviously, the result, it's cool and tough. Let's see a goalie get a win there, and he was named the player of the game on the Hawks little poll after the game. But even Saturday, because their structure kind of collapsed a little bit on Saturday after maintaining, even as they were building that 2-goal lead, it wasn't really clean, right? But Mrazek gave you 34 saves on 37 shots, and it took a overtime power play for them to beat him in the extra frame. So yeah, I don't really put that one on the goalie, just with so much space open on the ice. So Peter Mrazek definitely deserving of some stick taps here. Okay, as we close down our shows, we take a look at what's on tap next, and we update the Four Feathers predictions tracker. Tony, you were not on the last episode. Ron is going to get the point for this one. We only predicted 3 games out, so those last 2 don't count on there. But he said 1-2-0 versus Seattle, Vancouver, and Anaheim. I went a little more optimistic, said 2-1-0, but that leaves us now. We're all tied. We've all got 2 on the board here. So we're in a dead heat. Yeah. A good little competition here at the Four Feathers podcast. So Blackhawks upcoming schedule is as follows for Thanksgiving week. You've got Wednesday against Dallas, 7:30 p.m. On Chicago Sports Network Plus. Remember, the Bulls are on that night too, so that'll be on the Plus channel. You got Friday at Minnesota, Blackhawks Friday, Tony. Blackhawks Friday, 1 p.m. Matinee game at Minnesota, also on Chicago Sports Network. Sunday, another matinee, 2 o'clock at home against Columbus on Chicago Sports Network. And then Monday, back-to-back at Toronto, 6:30 p.m. on Chicago Sports Network. That's a 4-game stretch here, Tony. How do you see it playing out?
Right off the bat, I see this as a 1-3 stretch. Columbus probably being your win on Sunday. That said, I'd like to see this be a 2-2 stretch, but I'm going to have to take some realistic look at this and say 1-3.
Hate to be boring, but since we're all tied here and we're vying for some points, the most realistic outcome is exactly what you had just said. And I would probably, if I were to just look at it on paper, say that Columbus would be the win. Who knows? Maybe they could surprise Dallas with these new line shakeups and Bedard with some urgency to get off the schneid, but I don't know. Either way, I see it playing out 1-3-0. I'm not going to go crazy with overtime predictions. I'm sure Ron, if you were on the show, would probably throw in some sort of overtime sprinkle in there, but you and I
gets fancy with it.
You and I got the identical predictions. Hate to be boring on you, listeners, but we got some standings build up here within Four Feathers. So that's
we both need a point here.
Yeah, we both need a point. So it's Thanksgiving week. I hope everybody enjoys the holidays. We appreciate you tuning in to the Four Feathers podcast. Enjoy some hockey this week. It should be a good one. I know there's a lot of football and whatnot also on, but hey, we've got a 4-game slate here. You got your Black Wednesday, you got your Blackhawks Friday, and then a back-to-back on Sunday, Monday. So it should be at least good to take in the food and the beverages and all of that while you're enjoying some puck. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube at Four Feathers Pod, or excuse me, at On Tap Sportsnet on YouTube. On the socials, it's at Four Feathers Pod and at On Tap Sportsnet. And as always, check out ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. That'll do it. Season 6, episode 9 of the Four Feathers podcast. Not so nice this time around. Everyone have a great Thanksgiving. Until next time, let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.